The Huracan Performante is a pretty amazing car. The performance is insane. The sound is equally as insane. I think the look is incredible. But once you've lived with the car a little bit, there are certain things about it that can be a little bit annoying, which I figured would be fun and interesting to point out to you in video form. Like I've talked about before, you're going to have compromises with a performance car. That's kind of part of the fun, in my opinion. But if you're going to have certain features in the car and they just don't work all that well, then what's the point of having them in the first place? That's more or less what I want to point out for you in this video. Which is why we're going to start with perhaps the dumbest feature in this car and in Huracans in general, the cup holder. And before somebody makes the argument, what do you even need a cup holder in a Lamborghini for anyways? Well, I tend to agree with you, but I am somebody that likes to take a water bottle with me, or at least something to drink in the car pretty much every single time that I leave the house. So if my car is going to have a cup holder, which this one does, I expect that cup holder to be effective at holding my cup. Upon a quick inspection of the inside of this Lamborghini, you'll notice that there is no cup holder down the middle. You really don't have anything here other than some buttons. There's obviously nothing happening here on the driver's side, and on the passenger side, it just looks to be left completely empty. But this little guy right here, push that in, and cup holder mode is engaged. Unfortunately, that cup holder might be the worst cup holder design of all time, in that it doesn't really hold your cup. Basically what that cup holder is a hazard to spill something inside your car and or launch a projectile. So here's a perfect example of the effectiveness of this cup holder. So I'm going to activate cup holder mode. I'm going to take my water bottle, I'm going to put it inside, and I'm going to execute a little pull right here, and we'll see what happens. As expected. And now my water bottle is on the floor on the passenger side where I can no longer reach it. Cup holder disengaged. At some point on this channel, I want to make a video talking about spec, especially with high-end cars, because if you've ever gone into a Lamborghini dealership and inquired about speccing a Huracan, whether it's a regular Huracan, a Performante, any variant, you name it, one of the most important options that that dealer is going to push on you is the cup holder option, which I believe is part of some convenience package. I'm not entirely sure what else comes with the cup holder. The option ends up being like $3,000 or $4,000 Canadian. I'm sure it's different by region. Either way, it's a lot of money for a single cup holder, and what you get for that money is basically this flimsy piece of plastic, very shallow, extremely ineffective cup holder. But every dealer will tell you that if you don't have this option when you go to resell the car, or when they try to sell the car in the first place, if it's dealer stock or something like that, they will have people that won't buy that car because it doesn't have a cup holder. Which I realize sounds totally backwards, because if you're buying a Lamborghini new or used, you would think that the last priority as far as options in the car is concerned is having a cup holder, but dealers will swear that it's extremely important to have, which is fine. I don't mind paying for the option, but if you're going to give me a cup holder and charge me a significant amount of money for it, make sure it's a cup holder that actually works. The only time this cup holder is effective is if you put a cup in the cup holder and then drive the car around like a Toyota Prius, because it's so shallow and so unstable for what it's holding that if you try to drive the car at all like a Lamborghini should be driven, that item, that cup, is going to either spill on your dashboard, spill on your seat, or if it's a water bottle like this, it's going to be launched somewhere in the cabin while you're driving quickly, which you probably don't want to happen. So even though my car has the very prestigious cup holder option, what I instead do for the safety of myself and the interior of my car is I take the water bottle out, I disengage the cup holder, and I leave it on the seat next to me where it rolls around and eventually ends up on the floor anyways. Oh, here's this guy on a bike. Annoying about this car is when you're stopped at an intersection, especially if you're the very front car, where the issue is, at least for me, and keep in mind I'm about 6 feet tall, and the seat is all the way down, almost all the way back, so I'm pretty much in the lowest position I can possibly be in. But when I'm stood all the way up like I would normally be, if I look straight up, I cannot see the stoplight. So what ends up happening is you're stopped at a light, everybody is staring at you because you're driving a Lamborghini. God forbid you have your windows down so they have a really good look at you, and you're kind of turning your head like this so you can see when the light is going to turn green, because if I stay all the way up here, I legitimately can't see the lights at all. And I guess this is going to depend on the intersection. If the lights were mounted a little bit lower, it wouldn't really be an issue. But basically, because of the angle of this car, to have that Lamborghini look, you really can't see out the upper area of the windshield all that well at all. Again, if I was a little bit shorter, would this be as much of an issue? I guess not. But as a whole, when people are looking at you and you're kind of turning your head like there's something wrong with your neck, it's annoying. It's kind of a little bit embarrassing. So I can assure you there's nothing wrong with me, I just can't see. And to be fair to the Huracan, this isn't an issue that is specific to this car. Rear mid-engine cars aren't known for great driver visibility, but it is something that is a little bit annoying every time you're stopped at a light. Now the next issue I have with this car is in regards to the driving modes, and honestly this is the one thing that if it was improved, it would make the experience of driving this car on the road significantly better. Now this car has 3 individual driving modes: Strada, Sport, and Corsa, which translates to Street, Sport, and Race. Sport is the same in English as well as Italian apparently. Either way, when you flip it through the different modes, it basically changes everything about how the car drives, from the throttle response, the way that it shifts, the stiffness of the suspension, the steering to a certain extent, the valves open and closed on the exhaust. All of these things are tied to 3 driving modes on the car. And as I've talked about in a previous video, if you buy a Lamborghini of any kind and you're not driving it in race mode 95% of the time, you're doing it wrong. So that's exactly what I do with this car. Basically, the second that I get in, I flip it into Corsa. I can only think of maybe like a 3-minute stint that I've had it in any other mode. The only issue with that is when the car is in Corsa mode, the engine response is the best. The sound of the engine, I think, is the best. The way that it shifts is way more aggressive, which is kind of what you want from the Lamborghini experience. However, the stiffness of the suspension is as stiff as the car gets. And when you're on the road, depending on the road, of course, that can be extremely annoying. Now, I guess this is an issue that's going to depend on where you live and how the road conditions are. I'm currently on a decent road, so it's not a big deal. But if I go into town where the roads are a lot more rough, I'm bouncing around like crazy. But I insist on leaving it in Corsa mode. It's just something that I deal with when I decide to go out in this car in the first place. What would be ideal, though, is if I could actually customize the suspension separate to everything else. Because if I could have the car in Corsa, but then have the suspension set to Strada, which I realize doesn't really make a lot of sense from a performance standpoint, but if you're driving the car on the road anyways, especially at lower speeds, I still get the sound, I still get the shift that I want, even though I'm not really pushing the car, but the ride's going to be significantly better. Unfortunately, that's just not possible in this particular car, although I think on the Evo they've actually changed that, where you can actually create your own custom driving mode and tune all of these different elements individually. So it looks like Lamborghini might have improved that, but for the regular Huracan as well as the Huracan Performante, you are stuck to these 3 modes, and if you're driving the car in Corsa, it's going to be a bumpy ride, at least on the road. The fourth thing that's super annoying about this car is the speed of the front lift. Not that it's too fast, but that it goes up way too slow. And in a previous video, I did show that I was having an issue with my front lift, mainly with a passenger in the car. That seems to be fixed now, but the speed of the lift definitely has not improved. And really the reason why you need a front lift on a car like this is because obviously it's very low, and the approach angle that you have at the front is not very good when the car is all the way down. Now, when you enter a driveway or go over a speed bump or something like that, unless you want to constantly tear up the underside of your bumper or potentially even tear it off, you need to use the front lift to raise the front end of the car to clear the curb without scraping anything. It's just something that you need to have in a car like this. It is an option, which is kind of surprising, but you're going to have a hard time finding a Huracan of any kind without the front lift option. I actually need it to get in and out of my own driveway. And I guess to give you guys a demonstration of how long that takes, in an ideal situation where the car is completely stopped, here is me exiting my own driveway. So I'm here in my driveway, and in order to exit without scraping the front of the car, I have to use the front lift. So to give you guys a perfect example of, I guess, the best opportunity for the front lift to work as quickly as it possibly can, I'm stood still in my driveway, slight incline. I'm going to hit the switch right now, and you can see here, maybe from the back camera, but probably not, the lift is currently going up. I have a timer on screen so you can see how long it takes exactly. And it's up. And that's how long it takes when you're totally stopped. And I mentioned this in a previous video, when you have the front lift engaging where it's actually going up, you can't go above 70 kilometers an hour, which is very easy to do in a car like this. If you go above that, it's going to automatically cancel the front lift and drop back down. So you have to manage your speed as well. I'm sorry, there's a huge, I can't, just give me a second. Long story short, it seems to take longer for the lift to go all the way up while you're actually moving, which often is most of the time when you actually need it. Another thing that's annoying about how long the lift takes is that often when you need it, it's when you're going somewhere that you're not familiar with, and by the time that you see the obstacle that you're going to need to lift the car up to go over, it just takes way too long for the lift to actually go up. So you end up being the guy in traffic in a Lamborghini driving way too slow and or being completely stopped, and everybody's looking at you saying, hey, look at that guy in the Lamborghini that doesn't know how to drive, even though all you're really trying to do is not tear off your own front bumper, waiting for your extremely slow front lift to go up. So it's definitely one of those first world problem situations, as people like to point out in the comment section. But for a car this expensive, especially given other front lift options that are out there and how much faster they are, it seems only fair that this car would have a faster front lift as well. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Which brings us to the fifth and final most annoying aspect of the functionality of this car, and that is the entire infotainment system. Specifically, the fact that this car has Apple CarPlay, but in order to use Apple CarPlay, Corsa mode. Basically, the way the infotainment system works is that everything is tied to this little screen right here in front of me, which when the car is in race mode, it's pretty much dedicated to your revs and which gear you're in, along with your speed, as well as other information that you choose to have there. Now, if you want to use Apple CarPlay, the only place for that information to be displayed is right here on this screen. And in Corsa mode, it makes it full screen. If I flip it to Sport, I can actually have the rev limiter right there on the side and then some other information right there, which is fine. But when you have Apple CarPlay on, there's no way to have the rev limiter right there, but then also have your Apple CarPlay apps and information on the opposite side. You have to go full screen Apple CarPlay, which means that you don't get to see your revs whatsoever, which means that you basically, while using Apple CarPlay, have to flip the car into automatic mode, let it shift on its own, and again, kind of drive it around like a Toyota Prius, which is super annoying. Again, I like to leave the car in Corsa mode, and once the car is in Corsa mode, you can't see anything else. It doesn't let you display anything. In fact, if somebody calls you, you have to flip it out of Corsa mode to accept the call at all, which is totally ridiculous. And then once you're talking again, you can flip it back into Corsa mode. But just the way that you have to use this and constantly having to flip in and out of modes, maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing with this type of thing. It's not really something that I use while I'm driving in this car anyways, but the fact that it has it and it's so inconvenient to use is just extremely annoying. It's so annoying, in fact, that I no longer have a cable to actually use Apple CarPlay in this car, because I know I'm just going to get more frustrated with it than anything, rather than, I guess, reap the benefits of how convenient it's supposed to be. And there you have it, folks. Those are the 5 most annoying things about the Lamborghini Huracan that you probably wouldn't know unless you've lived with the car a little bit, which of course I have. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please support it with a like. And if you don't want to miss out on future weekly car content from me, a wide variety of videos, I'm covering all kinds of different topics. I don't even know what the next video is going to be. Make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, feel free to leave them down below. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.